What's up, guys? So today on the stash, we're going to talk about a game that it kind of has a weird emotional attachment to me. Usually the games I talk about on here are games I grew up with or enjoyed later on in life. Eventually I'll get to games that maybe I didn't play until I was older and stuff like that. But usually I have some sort of story attached to a lot of these games, or I have very fond memories of this game. This next game, though, I wouldn't necessarily say the memories are fond, but the memories are kind of strong about it. And it's Sonic 3D Blast. Now, I know what you're saying. Who has an emotional attachment to Sonic 3D Blast? And I wouldn't say that I necessarily would have if this game wasn't given to me in the manner that it was. So Sonic 3D Blast, in case you're not familiar with this game, released on the Sega Genesis and the Sega Saturn. Now, we'll be talking about the Sega Genesis version of the game today because that's where my emotional attachment lies. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog was kind of getting a bit, I guess you could say, hoard out at this point. There was tons of Sonic stuff. He was very strong on the Sega Genesis, but something kind of needed to come along and shake things up a little bit. They were doing some interesting stuff on the Game Gear with the Sonic the Hedgehog games, but as far as consoles were concerned, besides stuff like Sonic Spinball, which is another game that I absolutely love, and of course Dr. Robotnik's Mean Beam Machine, which was just a reskin of Puyo Puyo, Sonic was getting a little bit stale. It's like we had 3 Sonic games. You also had Sonic CD on there. So they went in a bit of a different direction with this game. This game was actually done by Traveler's Tales, and instead of being a side-scrolling Sonic the Hedgehog game, they went with an isometric view. And this was kind of off-putting for a lot of people, very reminiscent of the handheld game Sonic Labyrinth, which also had this sort of view. Now, of course, Dr. Robotnik, yes, Robotnik, not Eggman, is up to his mischievous ways capturing these things called flickies, and you gotta release the flickies from their environment. Now, the way the levels play out in this game is completely different than what you would see in a game that was a traditional Sonic the Hedgehog game up until this point. You had these larger style areas in which you were free to go wherever you wanted to go as long as you could find the 5 flickies. You would get the 5 flickies and they would sort of attach to you, but if you got hit by an enemy, you would lose the flicky and have to pick it up again. You take these flickies to a big ring that you jump into, and then bam, you now have saved the flickies and you can move on to the next area. It's honestly not a bad gameplay mechanic. I think it's something that could have worked out a little bit better than it did on the Sega Genesis, because I feel like the Sega Genesis does have a few problems with this version of the game. But before we get into the problems, let's talk about the positive stuff. The positive stuff right out the bat is this amazing CGI cutscene that plays at the start of a Sega Genesis game. Now, in today's standards, this looks absolutely terrible, highly compressed, and not very impressive. But back in the day, this was pretty mind-blowing because you only got this sort of full motion video on stuff like the Sega CD. That was the whole point of the CD-based medium. But somehow, Traveler's Tales came up with a way to have this very grainy video, and it was impressive at the time. It was pretty cool. It was mind-blowing to see, especially when you're a kid playing Sega Genesis. I would say the visual style of the game is a little bit different, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's actually pretty decent in terms of the color palette and just the different levels that you have. The different enemies all look pretty good. I think it's a very visually pleasing game. The music in the game is forgettable. It's not intrusive or anything like that, but it's not necessarily standout like previous Sonic the Hedgehog titles. But this game kind of falls apart a bit in terms of controls. I would say like loosey-goosey is the best way to describe it, because Sonic slips and slides all over these levels, and once you build up a little bit of speed, I don't know, man, you can adjust to it much like you could adjust to it in Sonic Labyrinth, but it's really jarring just how sort of slippery these controls feel, especially compared to the previous Sonic the Hedgehog games that we had gotten up until that time. Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Sonic 1 even, all controlled masterfully. If you got hit by an enemy, it was pretty much your fault because you didn't know the level layout, or you didn't expect an enemy to come, or you didn't jump when a projectile was coming towards you. With this game, when you build up speed, like you don't come to a halt quite as quick as you probably should, and it leads to lots of slippage, and it kind of, you know, I wouldn't say ruins the game experience, but it sort of diminishes the game experience, because I feel like it does hold the game back from being, you know, a really good Sonic the Hedgehog game. And that's pretty much the game in a nutshell. It's nothing groundbreaking. It obviously was more of a cash grab to both elongate the Sega Genesis life cycle and, of course, put Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega Saturn. Sonic the Hedgehog did not have a Sega Saturn game. Ever. You had Sonic 3D Blast and you had Sonic Jam, Sonic Extreme, Sonic Crackers, all of these things that were development stuff for the Sega Saturn never came to fruition, which was a damn shame that this was like the main game that came out in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise as far as offering new content on the Sega Saturn. But I say all that to say the game itself isn't what makes me, you know, have nostalgia. You know, I do enjoy the game. I actually have the game physically in cart form. I might pick up a box for it one day. But the nostalgia for this game comes from me on a very personal level, because this was actually the last Christmas gift I ever got from my biological father. Now, we had a falling out, you know, it was what it was. You know, it was what it was. I was a kid and I was angry about something, and we had this falling out, and we never really made peace or anything like that. I remember for my high school graduation, he did send me a graduation card with some money in it, and my mom was like, you know, you need to say thank you. You need to do a thank you card. And I was like, no, I'm not doing shit. And so she actually like told me what to write in the card, and I just wrote it and signed it. But we never made peace. And our last conversation wasn't very peaceful either. And he passed away a few years ago to an addiction, probably 6 years ago, I guess, 5-6 years ago. But I'll always remember this game as the last gift I ever got for Christmas from him. And he always did a good job, you know, for all his flaws and all of his demons and, you know, all the problems that we had. I will say he always did a damn good job of making sure that I got something cool for Christmas, whether it was a Sega Genesis Model 2, that was from him, whether it was a Virtual Boy. I picked a Virtual Boy over a Saturn and a PlayStation for Christmas one year, because I don't know, that's just what I wanted. My cousin had one and I wanted one too. So yeah, I'll always remember this game, you know, for the good it represents and the bad it represents, and there'll always be a memory attached to it. Sorry that this kind of took a bit of a somber tone. That's not what I'm about, but you know, this was kind of therapeutic for me. And plus I get to talk about Sonic 3D Blast, which not a great game, but a game I like. Did you ever play Sonic 3D Blast? If so, let me know in the comments section down below, whether it was on the Genesis or the Sega Saturn. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the stash, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're doing 2 retro videos a week. Who TF is back as well. So we're talking to people. I want to talk to more wrestlers and stuff like that, more people outside of the gaming industry, because I think that's pretty fun. So let me know who you want to see on the show. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.